Yo, it's the Way Forward broadcast. We are here together. Somehow magically we have jumped through the screen and we have imagined ourselves getting together and we have achieved this moment. And so the Way Forward season ending season 2 broadcast is going to be Jason and I chopping it up here. We're in Lynchburg, sanctuary behind. Lynchfield, not Lynchburg, because people in Virginia, they're just like, wait, where you guys at? You at Liberty? No, we're Litchfield, Illinois. And Sanctuary is behind us here. And so we just thought we'd come in all things politics, religion, race, ethnicity, those discussions. We're having them, season ending. And so, Jason, take it away. Your show now.
Yeah, in my house, right?
Yeah,
in my house, we get to do it.
Have to click over.
Well, Jason's operating on his first cup of coffee. So this could be the Erskine Way Forward show if I don't perk up here in a minute. But what's exciting how God worked it out was that to have us together to end this show. And so I just think that's fun because when we've talked about doing this show in the past, it's always been something we wanted to do together. And you're in Nashville and I'm here, so it never works out that way. But this time we got to have some good food and fellowship last night, and now we're getting to do the Way Forward.
Here we go. So the comment section is turned on for those of you who are watching us on YouTube Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know there's an international audience that watches also on Facebook Live. And so thank you for your energy. Keep that energy and keep those comments coming. Hey, look, it's the summertime. We know that there's a lot of people who are traveling. We're kind of changing times of things because there's a busy schedule here on this side. We know you guys are very busy. And so everybody that tunes in and is watching us and commenting on things, thank you so much. I will remind you that there's about a 10-second delay between what you hear and like when you comment. And so if we say something that's dumb, which
snarky,
yeah, we'll probably say something. Please be aware of the fact that you have to kind of be more specific about what it is that you're commenting on, because we may have moved on to other topics. This show's, we're
popping.
Yeah. On a Saturday morning, we are just light speed. So just be specific about the comment. We'll try to get to it. We really appreciate the audience. You guys are very kind, even in some of the disagreements that we've had, but we continue to talk about politics, race, and religion, and
no-nos.
All the no-nos. And so we are going to continue doing that today. This is a season ending show. And so what we want to do today is we want to have an opportunity to kind of talk about some things that we have learned over the course of this second season. And I would say for me, this season has been a season of growth as much, if not more so, than last season. And we're going to highlight a couple of things there. But hey, you've got your Cubs hat on. You wanted to give a quick shout out here that you talked about how well they were doing.
Did you
Reduce sports.
Did you happen to see the comeback against the Cardinals at Wrigley? I think it was yesterday. Down 4-1, come back to win something like 8-4.
Raise your hand if you saw that comeback.
I didn't see it, but I got to watch it on the game box because I don't have cable and stuff like that, so I have to wait for the YouTube highlights. But the Cubs are playing really good baseball right now. We got taken to us by the Giants, but we went back and took 2 out of 3 with the Padres, hoping to take 2 out of 3 with the Cardinals and keep us tied with the Brewers. Because
I'm a Mets fan. I ain't got a dog in the fight.
Yeah, and it's basketball finals. So I know that right now Erskine and I are in 2 different worlds. I got a world in base. I got a foot in baseball and a toe in basketball because I was just getting the Lakers got eliminated. So
yeah.
I think I even texted you that, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
I was so.
You said no more LeBron. You're so excited that he got eliminated.
This little tantrum as he walked off the court. I was like, "That's his classic." What an exclamation mark!
We need to get LeBron on this show. Like he has been a spokesman for.
We need to get LeBron.
He's been a spokesman for certain forms of justice.
I feel like LeBron. I say that when I have a bad day. I feel like LeBron.
Yeah. So good morning, Mayoshi. Thank you for tuning in. I did want you to know that I did reach out to Monique and got the standard reply that there's a high volume of people that are interested, and so they can't respond to every letter, but they certainly will read it. And God bless you. Have a great show and a great life. So I did what I could. thank you for getting in contact with Monique. She's with the Center for Biblical Unity.
Oh yeah.
And so, so definitely following that and trying to imbibe all of her teachings there.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk a quick bit here about some things that we learned. And I don't know, you're on your second cup of coffee here. So
Ethan just took me up.
Yeah,
this
is
a never-ending cup. It's coming.
This is great for me to see behind the scenes, kind of what's happening here, because he's got a little arm that just kind of reaches out. I'm surprised you don't have a straw that just like kind of goes to like someplace.
I actually prefer an IV.
Yeah,
just get an IV. I'm trying to train Ethan up to be able to plug an IV so I can just go straight to it. But Ethan's my right hand man. He's my oldest son. Blessing to me in so many different ways. But one of the ways he's a blessing to me is he makes an outstanding cup of coffee. So he's who I turn to when I'm in a bind.
That's what I need to do. I need to get Justin up on this thing.
Yes.
And
you need to drink coffee.
Helping out. I'm gonna drink, I don't know, like it'd be like a seltzer water or something like that.
So. I don't know how that works with you. Like, how do you get up in the morning and not drink coffee?
I just get up in the morning, bro. It's just I'm just like that. I'm that guy. I wish I could.
Let me ask you a question though. Do black people drink coffee?
I think Starbucks would say that black people drink coffee. I think now some of the hipster coffee shops, I think black people are probably intimidated to go in those places because like Hipsterville, I haven't really known hipsters to be too nice. If you're a hipster that's out there and you're a nice hipster, please comment on the show and like absolve other hipsters because they're really hard people to talk to.
Really?
Yeah. And so like coffee shops generally tend to be kind of a quasi mysterious, like you either want to be left alone or if you're the person in a coffee shop that wants to talk to people, like Hipstervilles and like Barista Parlor, places like that, that's not like the spot. They kind of already got an attitude because they think, you don't know anything about coffee, which I don't know anything about coffee, but I'm sure people who buy coffee and are connoisseurs of coffee know about coffee. I'll be not a place that black people hang out a lot.
I'll be straight with you. In my coffee experience, I see very few black people in coffee shops. I would say I even worked at Starbucks in seminary for a little bit. And I would say if I had 100 customers come through the drive-thru, maybe 1 or 2 were black. And that was in Louisville. I'm not using hyperbole. Like I'm kidding. I'm like
black people, if you're watching this show, please come to the defense of
I would like to know.
Do black people drink coffee? Well, okay. What do we mean by this question? Do we mean black people drink coffee like white people, or do black people drink coffee? Well, there's two questions going on here.
Let's
parse this out.
Do they like it black or they like it cream and sugar?
Woefully inadequate to answer this question because as I stated before, I do not drink coffee.
Yeah.
But I would not say that I'm stereotypical of all black people because there are some black people who drink coffee.
I'm
not one of them.
I'm a white man who drinks white coffee. It's cream and sugar always. I rarely have it black. It's too bitter. I have it black. I'll tell you what, I'll have black coffee every now and then if it's got a very distinctive taste. Like if it comes from every now and then missionary friends will send like a half a pound of coffee from, I got a friend like in Papua New Guinea. That was really cool. So I drank that straight black. Otherwise, it's white coffee.
Now I'm being told that we're fuzzy. Again, what does that mean? Like fuzzy wuzzy?
Fuzzy
was a bear? Fuzzy wuzzy had no hair? Like what? The fuzzy like in sound or fuzzy as in the picture?
Content is fuzzy. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. What are you guys talking about this morning?
Yeah. So if it's fuzzy because of content, it's probably because again I'm going off my second cut. But I'll speak into it. Y'all are fuzzy. All right. Well, I'm curious now if we can have somebody settle up for us. Is coffee a thing for the black community? Do you see many coffee shops in the black community? Ooh, that's a good question. Dude,
Do I see many coffee shops in the black community?
You see a barbershop.
You see a
grocery
barber
store,
shop.
which we have to do that yet.
You see the corner store. I don't know if coffee's included. Maybe you get some coffee alongside of
like at McDonald's.
like the ribs.
No.
I don't know. Help us out.
Help us out. Help us out.
If you're watching out there, or if you can contribute anything to this conversation, I'm about to get off of this conversation because I'm just trying to think, like, all the times that I've been in predominantly black areas, you know, it depends on kind of the socioeconomics. If it's like DeSoto or someplace like that, that has a lot of black people that are sort of upper middle class, then you're going to have coffee shops.
Yeah.
You probably have chains. You may not have your original entrepreneurial coffee shops like you do in Portland or Austin or East Nashville.
Like your small business types.
Yeah. But you'll have chains. There's a demographic there.
Do you think it's more of a I'll get my coffee at like McDonald's, Burger King, something like that?
Dunkin' Donuts kind of thing?
I was going to say Dunkin' because America runs on Dunkin', you know? I'm intrigued by it because
Now you've asked me to talk about coffee, and I don't even drink coffee. Like, the only time I have coffee is never. And I go to coffee shops all the time for meetings.
Yeah.
But I usually get the seltzer water and call it good.
All right.
And sometimes I'll put things in a coffee cup that aren't coffee just so I can make it look like I'm drinking coffee so I can be part of the culture.
All right.
But, you know, as black people, we always learn how to blend into the white culture. That's what we got to do to survive. So if everybody else is drinking coffee, you're like,
there's no problem here, officer. I'm just drinking my coffee.
Coffee. That's what we do around here.
That's right. That's right.
So
that's it. That's it.
My just commenting about the ribs and coffee. No, I'm not saying that you really have ribs and coffee. I'm just saying the same place that you would get ribs would be probably the same place that would have coffee.
Really? That's
if they want to. Well, you're not doing ribs in the morning anyway. So
all right.
I don't know.
It sounds like we need a field trip.
We need a field trip. We need to go to the barbershop. We need to go to the barbershop and get some footage.
I need to get my fade.
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to find out if there are coffee shops in predominantly black communities.
Yes. We'll both get fades if we go to the black.
That's right.
Black barbershop. I'll get a nice little edge up, let taper fade over here.
Yeah.
You know, so that'd be good.
I haven't cut what I got left.
Well, no, they'll edge you up. It look nice. It look real nice. And if you want a little beard outline there, they'll they got you, man. They got you. So let's jump into our topic for today. Some things that we learned. I've got about 3 things that I've learned, but I'm going to let you have the floor, sir, as we are in Litchfield, Illinois, and we'll talk about some of the things that you've learned and continue our discussion. So again, the comment section is turned on. Mayoshi is making good use of that comment section this morning. Fuzzy as we are. Am I any clearer now?
Right. We did pay the bill.
Yeah. So. I don't know what their internet situation is like. I can't vouch for that, but I know that, you know,
spotty.
If it's spotty, then, you know, that might make us a little fuzzy.
Yeah. So the question is, to me, is what have you learned over the course of this season? And I know that Erskine's going to speak a little bit to this because we were talking about this morning just a little bit. But one of the things I realized about this issue, I think more this season than I have ever, is the depth of the issue. It's the nuances, and I think you're going to use the word complexities. I think that's a fair word. When we had our interviews with Pastor Aaron and pastor up in Milwaukee,
yeah, good pastor.
Yeah, those guys brought to light things that Pastor Kimbrough, those things brought to light things to me that I just did not really grasp. And I love their humility. And Coach Aaron in particular, when he talked about how he came to a church and this church was wanting to predominantly begin to minister to its community, where that community was predominantly black. And as that began to happen successfully, which was an answer to prayer, an answer to ministry, all of a sudden there's a white flight that happens. And it didn't just happen one time. It happened like 3 times or something like that. I thought, wait a minute, there's a pattern there that over the course of this man's ministry, over 20 some odd years, 30 years, he has seen that pattern. And I left like, well, you can't argue with that. I mean, you can't argue with that. Like, how do you argue with a man's experience? 3 different churches, Texas, KC, Kansas City, and Georgia. I think was the other one, right?
Atlanta.
And here you have this, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on with that? Well, he'd be the first to tell you there's all kinds of variables, but one of the things that just stands out is when the majority culture becomes the minority culture, the majority culture likes to bail. And that was just one of those things I was like, yeah, that's an issue inside the Christian context, inside of the church. And God gives you what you ask for. And you're like, well, wait a minute now. That's okay as long as we keep this balance 60-40, 70-30, which isn't balance. You know what I'm saying? So I thought that was, to me, enlightening. And then, of course, the wisdom that came from Pastor Kimbrough as he just talked about different things. So that was one of the things. And there's some of the issues as we began to talk to other people, all these things that began to pop up that I just didn't even consider and think about, which told me how short-sighted my opinion is. And really kind of exposed to me the narrowness of my context. That the show forced me to broaden something out, and I was like, that now begins to explain why some people feel the way they do, and then that means now the solution is still the gospel and still Christian community, still the church, but you have to begin to take into the context of people's situations, their community life, and other things that they're experiencing. Yeah. So
I want to piggyback on that for just a second here. Thank you. Using the free version of the app at this point. So, got to close out some ads. But I want to piggyback on that and just say, I stated in my notes is that I had learned really the complex issues don't go away easily or quietly.
Yeah.
And that there's a depth to these discussions. When we first started this out, I mean, I think probably like a lot of people who watch this show, who are lovers of the gospel, who are lovers of the church and the kingdom, and who have invested themselves a lot in the work of the gospel. There's nothing else that we're going to do. We're going to preach the gospel. We're going to teach the gospel. We're going to disciple people. And so we see ourselves doing that all the time and just simply saying, well, what else would we be doing? And kind of applying that kind of ethic and saying, okay, that's all there is to this issue. And probably like yourself, I came into it thinking, oh yes, it's pretty easy, simple solution. I mean, yes, preach the gospel, have relationships with people, do life together. And then it's a pretty simple thing, pretty easily solved. But then I started being introduced to people who had experienced some trauma.
Yeah.
And who had, because of their experience, had maybe several instances or prolonged experiences in which they were in a situation of injustice. I think anyone would call it injustice. Yeah. And they were not recovering from it just simply by saying, oh, I'm just going to say a quick prayer. Everything has gone away. Yeah. Everything is absolved. But, we even know this. We do foster care. Like there's classes that we need to take because kids that have come from a traumatized situation, they're not going to respond, nor can they respond in the way that other people who have been in a more normalized situation respond when various things happen in life. And so that trauma response, it's been all sort of educated and burned into them as a very big key to this. And I was not taking that into account the way that I should have to be able to recognize that, okay, I can look at this and think, this is the response that maybe you could have in a normalized situation, but this is the response that I keep seeing from a traumatic situation. Yeah. We need to deal not from a normalized vantage point, but we need to deal with this from how do we help move and heal some of the trauma here to help us move into more of a normalized situation and establish trust in there. And so I think a lot of times the conversation gets a little bit disjointed when there's just one approach and just say, okay, this is respond this way. And one of my issues, and I'll mention this name, not to say anything bad about it, these folks, but just to say that I think that this is a little bit of the issue that I have with Candace Owens and Larry Elders and some of those folks is they substitute that and say, well, okay, this is the issues, so this is the response. And you're like, wait a minute, there should be more of a nuanced response to that.
Yeah.
And not everything is the nail and you're the hammer. And so just drive that point home. Like, I don't think Republicanism is the only answer to what these issues are. And sometimes when it's couched in those terms of, if we could just get people to stop being democratically minded and become more conservative minded, then that would solve the issue. Well, certainly that would solve some issues, and I'm not disagreeing with that. Certainly conservative myself, but that's not the only answer and the only response. And so deeply more complex than what I had realized from the trauma area.
Yeah. And because it's complex, one of the other things I've picked out from this that I've learned is how hard it is to stay consistent, to keep moving forward. And let me say what I mean by that. I will see something happen on TV, or I'll see an event, and I have immediate feelings about what I'm seeing.
If you have comments, jump in on any of that.
Yeah.
Is it complex, or are you just like, this is easy? This one solved.
So I'll hear things, I'll see things, I'll agree with things, disagree with things. And so I have these immediate opinions that form in my heart and my mind about things. I'll hear Ben Shapiro talk. I'll hear Candace talk, Larry Elders talk. I'll hear Vody Bachman talk. I'll hear even John MacArthur out in California. I'll hear him talk. And I will agree wholeheartedly at first with a lot of what I'm hearing. So I'm like, yeah, critical race theory, bad, gospel, good. This is what it is. And all those things. And so my natural inclination is to go that direction. And what I find myself doing is I can become very narrow and forget the people I'm dealing with if I'm just honing in on the ideas I'm dealing with, because there are people out there.
Yeah, just to be clear, we're not saying that John MacArthur or Vody Bachman or Ben Shapiro or any of those are bad.
No.
An incomplete view.
Yeah, no, I listen to them. I watch them on YouTube, and I will like, I agree. What I find difficult, though, is when I have to have conversations with people who don't agree with me, keeping my heart compassionate, gentle, open to hearing where they're coming from, and being able to things, to obviously reject some things with compassion and receive some things. And I get that from Kevin Jones at the University of Cedarville. He just has this kind of model that he teaches us to redeem something, reject something, and receive something. And if you begin to wisely look at an issue with those three things, you can begin to glean natural wisdom and truth from different situations. Well, I'm going to tell you what, that takes a lot of intention, and it takes a lot of curbing your emotions and feelings and trying to put your ideas through a grid. And that takes a lot of work. And this show, especially the second season, has taught me or challenged me to actually apply that grid, not just philosophically think it and offer the wisdom that I gleaned from, say, Dr. Kevin Jones, but to actually implement it as I'm talking and listening to people, and then be able to not just land so hard on something without giving it some more of that kind of filtering through.
Yeah. So comment on the screen there for everybody to see is, it's a very simple issue. Wicked hearts need salvation. Only Christ can provide. There's some that I appreciate about that answer, because Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through him. If you're willing to say, and this is anybody out there, I'll just broaden the category. If you're willing to say that the wicked hearts is your own, then I'm all about that answer. Because the more that you get into this, you recognize if it's us against them, who really are us? Who really are us except sinners who have been saved by grace, who are working out? God, who began a good work in us, will carry it into the day of completion, the day of Christ Jesus. We are not good people. Wicked hearts. Okay, so that's me. Wicked heart that is being sanctified and coming to greater knowledge and greater understanding about these issues, and greater, hopefully, areas of examination in my own heart and sinfulness and application of how it applies. If that's the simple that we're talking about, yeah, that's simple to diagnose that I'm the biggest problem here. And my need for Christ is the biggest issue that's there. And because I'm not glorified, I'm not all the way there, then this again becomes a very complex issue. Because we who know the good that we ought to do sometimes do not do it.
Yeah. Yep.
And so I think that's where the issue gets hard, is that there's even things that I look at my own life and think, man, I should know that, or I should have read that, or I should have understood that, or I should have perceived that that's not what those people are saying.
Yeah.
Or I should have given them at least the grace to say, what are they actually saying, before I go off on a soundbite and say, well, no, this is what they're saying, and this is who they are. And,
Right.
and so that I would have to say is not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diagnosis, easy.
Yeah.
Application, not easy.
Yeah. I think with that, the complexity of it, understanding how difficult it is for you to actually put your own opinions through a grid, your own emotions and feelings through a grid, for the betterment of, like Philippians 2, putting others' interests above your own, trying to get to the heart of matters and have relationships and maintain these relationships, even seek out these relationships. All of that adds to the complexity and the nuance that we're talking about. What makes it even more difficult in my mind is I didn't also realize how deep Christian nationalism goes into this whole thing. The more
viewership is going down right now.
Well, listen,
went down.
Here's an interesting,
from 5, 4, 3 to nobody's watching anymore. Christian nationalism.
Here's an interesting thing that I've faced as I'm trying to talk about these issues. I have opposed critical race theory. I don't buy into critical race theory. I think
You might need to say that again.
Yeah, I
because
don't.
there'll be people who think you do.
Yeah, I'm sitting there and I will tell you that
that we do.
Yeah, I don't think critical race theory is the answer to things.
We don't think critical race theory is the answer to things.
No,
and it'll be surprising, because the first thing people will say, somebody will watch this and they'll be like, "These guys believe in critical race theory."
We actually had a show not too. I mean, it was our first season where we kind of began to talk about cultural Marxism. We talked about some of the problems, and starting off with atheism and Marxism, and there's no bueno. So if you go back and see where we've come with this, we don't hold to it. And yet, if I entertain the idea of, listen, I don't believe that critical race theory is the answer. I do believe the gospel is the answer. And if you take critical race theory and you put it next to the gospel wins hands down. I'm not afraid to challenge the gospel with critical race theory, because I believe the truth always wins and prevails. And so I'm not afraid of it. I'm not unwilling to delve and talk about it. Now you say that, and then all of a sudden you encounter brothers and sisters in the church who began to throw around terms like "you're liberal" or "you're progressive" or "you're this." And if you get to know me, I'm the least liberal person in the room. However, again, taking that grid, trying to be compassionate, trying to think, trying to listen, and trying to know in the long run that the truth will win out. And I think one of the greatest examples I've seen in the media of that is the gentleman in Minnesota who was part of the Black Lives Matter network, and he left it because of the ugly truth that he found being a year into it. One of the things I made a comment to Erskine about that is, had we come so hard on something like critical race theory when he first entered in Black Lives Matter, or had we just assumed that all people who engage Black Lives Matter are these Marxists, we would have lost the opportunity to have a relationship with this guy. And here, a year and a half later, he finds out this stuff is not where it needs to be for the Black community.
Yeah.
Us trying to maintain that relationship and try to say, hey, look, the truth will win out if you're patient and you let it go, and you continue to engage it and talk about it. I'm not ever saying be passive and just let it have its course. No, I'm saying engage it, talk about it, but don't get so offended by it that you shut down the conversation. And I'm finding that if I speak like that or talk like that, my own brothers and sisters in the church, and I'm talking about the church, the Western church, come hard and heavy at you for thinking like that. And I attribute that to this kind of Christian nationalism that we're seeing all over.
So I don't know that I want to necessarily tackle Christian nationalism, because I don't have a lot of people who are in my family or in my circle who are so inclined toward Christian nationalism. Mm-hmm. I have some friends that definitely were at the Capitol on
Yeah.
January the 6th and definitely um, sort of enjoyed that energy and that momentum. I don't think they were a part of the Capitol riot, but they were definitely there in DC. And so, I mean, that's cool. That's a small fringe of my friends. I don't really have anybody in my family who would necessarily even be remotely considered Christian nationalist
Yeah. Yeah.
in that regard. And so I can spot that for what it is and see it and just see that this is a complete aberration. I don't know why we're not talking more about this, but I understand kind of the lay of the land is that automatically convicts a lot of people when you start getting into that discussion, because it's, Trump and how we vote for Trump and how we support Trump. And do we talk about things that he's doing? You know, that's a whole nother discussion. But for me, the critical race theory, that has been one in which both of us have maybe scratched our heads a little bit and said, wait a minute, we, as masters educated, and you're doing your doctorate now, we are required to converse with ideologies from all over the place,
Yeah.
as a resource for critical thinking and as an opportunity for us to advance arguments and to see trends and thought patterns that are out there. And it's a good process. It's a helpful process. When we come to critical race theory, it seems like there's a lot of people who want to just say, no, we can't talk about that. We can't go down that road. We need to silence the discussion. Nothing can be said. And I'm thinking this shouldn't be hard for Christians to put the two of these worldviews right next to each other and see the massive flaws that are in critical race theory. And then, I've lamented the fact that, okay, from a secular worldview, you have critical race theory that tries to apply societal good to a grid to society that is a common good for people that have been oppressed. Well, man, as Christians, we already should have done that. But we're content. And here's my challenge, I think, to the Christian audience is that we're content so many times to just sit back and let the government do it. Like if the government can come up with a early intervention program, okay, well, we'll criticize the fact that, well, we shouldn't be spending money that way. But where are these Christians, where are these churches that are going to intervene in these communities and actually have the relational capital to be able to do some things they need? Well, they're not going to do that. You know it, and I know it. They're not going to do that. And when we see people that are slipping through the safety nets in society and they're falling into poverty, and where the Christian organizations are like, we support Project Connect because they're actually going and getting people and giving them job skills and life skills and trauma healing. But where are the Christians in the churches that are doing that? Oh, that's dirty work. We don't get involved now. Let's just stay focused. Let's just, have our services on Sunday. Let's just preach and, slap each other on the back and good old boy and, what's going on. And so I'm concerned that we are not in a place where we're applying the actual gospel biblical worldview to the culture around us.
Yeah.
And we're being intimidated by, and, also I think sometimes just being lazy. Like we just don't want to engage. Like if the government is going to give people money, we'll criticize that. But when's the last time Christians gave out of their own pocket to help people who were struggling in a situation and to bring them to a better place in life? That gets a little bit messy, because just like somebody can say, well, reparations are wrong and affirmative action is wrong and all these different things are wrong. Well, there should be an adequate Christian response to these things. I'm not saying that everybody needs to, reach in their pocket and get a $20 bill out and hand it to the first black person that they see. But there certainly ought to be some people who, out of the compassion, the burden in their heart, say, you know what, I can help some of these people that I have relational capital with. And some of the ways that they're going to need that is they're going to need intervention. And so I'm going to do it. I'm not going to wait for the government. I'm not going to wait for the church and start to respond in some of these areas. And so that was just something that I think kind of pressed me a little bit this season, is that, man, there's so much more that we need to learn. Yeah. And when we close our minds to being learners, we actually hurt ourselves in the whole context of the argument. Like, we don't want to hear from you. Well, then you don't want to hear from us. Okay, good. Problem solved. No, it's not. You created another problem.
Right. And I wonder if it's just a lack of confidence in the gospel. We serve a risen King who is sovereign and Lord over all, and who is going to advance his kingdom and realize his kingdom. That's happening. It's going to happen. So we have a Messiah who conquered death, rose from the grave, is now interceding for the church and the saints, has given us his spirit to empower us to joyfully advance the kingdom by making much of him in the church, community, and the home. And here you have this beautiful truth, and he's given us his word, he's given us his wisdom, he's given everything we need. And then when it comes to applying it and actually engaging critical race theory or race relations or all the things that are there, we find, I found this season in particular, either silence or the pushback comes back to me more personal. This is an affront to our democracy, right? Which I'm very concerned about. However, I'm more concerned that it's an affront to the kingdom of God, and that these people who don't have Christ will suffer his wrath when they die. That's a concern for me. Also, what's a concern for me is that we're meant to bring life everywhere we go, and that takes a lot of work and patience and living. And I think we're content with, the American dream or the American Christianity. I don't know what you want to put your finger on it, but we're very content to be comfortable in our own little spots. And so this season in particular is drawn out to say, hey, look, that's not going to work if we're actually going to really solve some of these issues and begin to give a better context for our children to begin to deal with these issues, because that's huge too. That's the next generation.
Well, I'll put the question on the screen here. What do we still need to learn? What are you learning? What are some things that, in the context of this discussion, Meg, thanks for joining us from Red Oak, Texas this morning. But in the context of this discussion, what are you learning? Like, I learned a lot more about the Tulsa Massacre, and President Biden acknowledged that, the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. There were a lot of things that I learned about just the nuances of policing in America, and some of the recent things that we have experienced, and, sort of things that you do and things that you don't do, things that you say, the due process, how all of that works. I've been more familiar with that, certainly working from the Justice Circle vantage point in Nashville with the chief of police and the mayor's office. And so there's just a lot of things that we stand to learn as we engage in some of these discussions. And look, unless you're going to hide in a cave somewhere or just, have your the chosen frozen somewhere, you're going to have to engage this conversation. It'd be hard to be a Great Commission, gospel-oriented Christian and not engage the communities that are around you. And so, that's one of the things that we're going to have to be learners, be disciples. And be discipling other people in the process. So I'll put that question on the screen there. You guys can engage with that question. There's a lot of people who are, tuning into that discussion, and we'll get with you guys on that in just a second here. So keep those comments that are coming. We'll keep the conversation that's going. Great discussion this morning, and we're actually able to do it here together. And so that's been a key thing and an important thing. But Jason, as you see, you talked a little bit about the nationalism aspect of it. You've probably seen a lot more of that, and kind of how that morphs into, we have a right, we have, positional rights. And, I hear it used about Black people all the time, is like, why are you always trying to claim your rights? You don't have any rights. But I don't often hear that turned around the other side of that, to talk to majority culture and say, why are you always trying to claim your American rights? And it's almost like the Constitution gets put on the same plane as the Bible, and then it's hard to separate the two of those things. You're like, no, this is a right of mine that has been given by God and given by the Constitution. I'm like, I don't know, this whole rights thing, like, it goes both ways, it cuts both ways, and it can be ugly in both vantage points. But you probably see more of the Christian nationalism side of that. So let you speak to that issue. And I'm a Christian music artist in Nashville, and, I travel around for a living, and I'm not afraid to engage in these discussions, because I believe, and we believe, that these are the discussions that the church actually needs to be having. And so, I'll come to your church, and I don't have to talk about any of these things. I just think that for a majority culture, if you see a Black guy that is there and performing, ministering, doing all the different things that I'm doing in a way that glorifies Christ, that's kind of a glue agent for this. It's kind of a key factor, is that a lot of times people can't respond unless they see somebody that's like them.
Yeah.
And we can do probably a whole show on that, but it's amazing when I go to those churches that have just a few black people that are there. We're like a magnet. It's like, like we find each other. We begin to have relationship with one another. And I've actually had people say to me before, it's like, man, you guys hit it off amazingly in just like a short amount of time. And I'm like, first of all, I'm kind and friendly to everybody, but I have a heart, especially for those smatterings of minority culture that are out there in the predominantly white churches, evangelical conservative churches, who they want to follow the Lord. They just don't see any examples around them of people who have been invited into the discussion, who have been invited into a space where they have some measure of authority or leadership that they can say, okay, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I get that. I can see that in their presentation, and that encourages my heart. And so we want to be an encouragement to the church. We want to be an encouragement to God's people. And if you're watching the show and you're not a believer, man, we want to be an encouragement to you as well. Go back and watch some of the past episodes, and we take some funny positions on some things. And so that's always a good discussion.
Yeah, the white nationalism thing is, or I should say that the Christian nationalism thing. There is a fusing of your Christian theology with your political ideology, and the fusion, instead of allowing Christ to orchestrate, to organically grow your political ideology, what is good for mankind, and you may support democracy as being the best political ideology that does support mankind. But at the root of your democracy, of your political ideology, you've got to have grounded theology in who God is and his kingdom and what he wants us to do to make things good for everybody. We want everyone to enjoy, quote unquote, the good life, right? And what I find is that there's a weird mesh happening between political ideology and biblical theology, where almost your political ideology begins to kind of overcome or dictate more of your theology than the Bible itself. So what you believe about conservatism, what you believe about democracy, democratic principles, what you believe about the economy, the free market economy, what you believe about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, those things are good things to understand and to believe, but they never supersede or overcome the Bible. And so when you're talking about living out the Sermon on the Mount, when you're talking about living out the Christian faith and creating an environment like in your community where justice is prominent, where righteousness is prominent, where we have wisdom in our leadership, and we have safety, and we have things in place to help those who are hungry and shelter. And that comes from a Christian perspective. That comes from God wanting to advance his kingdom to all classes in society, right? And to make sure that we live out the kingdom as best we can here. That doesn't always look like conservatism. It doesn't always look like Republicans. It doesn't always look like capitalism. As good as capitalism can be as an ideology or philosophy. So I'm finding Christian nationalism is confusing the prominence of the political ideology with biblical theology. And the reason why I think that's happening is we have not taught theology in the church.
Yeah, that kind of harkens to some of the comments that I wanted to go into some of these comments. Secular schools would benefit greatly from requiring a worldview class. I want to take that comment. And then along that education line, Maelshi says, we need to continue to learn who God is, who we are. And the more we know and love him, the more we will love our neighbor. Loving our neighbor includes serving our neighbors. We need to learn to understand what we don't know. Understand that we don't know everything. That's kind of how I take that comment. If I'm wrong about that, Jason, let me know. Yeah, that's another good comment. We fail to realize that a Christian, we are slaves of Christ. It is in him we have no rights. So, harkening back to some of the things we talked about.
Yeah, or even the rights we do have, just because we can, should we? what does Philippians 2 look like in a democracy?
Mm-hmm.
What does Philippians 2 look like in a republic? And what does Philippians 2 look like in capitalism? Just that's one of the questions I ask.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things I'm trying to teach my kids. Every night we have an argument about dishes. I have two younger children who have spent the last year trying to learn to work together. And one of the environments I put them in is you got kitchen duty.
Yeah.
And one of the things,
parenting.
what I'm trying to tell them is worry about getting the job done is one principle I'm trying to teach the kids is the biggest issues, get your job, do the job. Don't worry about who's working, who's doing what, but get your job done. The second thing is how in the world do I make the other person successful? How do I put the other interest above my own? How come I'm always going towards the easy route, or how come I'm always wanting to take what's mine, but I'm never looking at what is best for the person I'm working with? Trying to take a Philippians 2 approach to dishes to teach my children to take a Philippians 2 approach to life. What am I going to do for my community? Why do I keep my yard clean? Why do I try to keep my house up, my property values up? It's not just so I can make money. Well, how does it affect my neighbors? And how's it going to affect my neighborhood? That's the biblical worldview I'm trying to look through, and I'm trying to teach my kids. I'm trying to consider what is in the best interest of my neighbors, along with what I'm doing here. I think that is.
I think we need to camp on that neighbor thing for just a second here, because Scott has written us a treatise, and I want to do it justice. I don't even know if I can get. And I apologize if you wrote more on this. This is all that we could get on the screen here, but I did want to give just a second. Do you need to leave here in a second?
No, we're good.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Just give me a second to do something real quick.
Okay, yeah, you go get some more coffee. So yeah, he'll be back in just a second here, but I did want to give this comment a little bit more time. Again, thank you for writing and I don't know if you're using a keyboard, or I don't know what device you're using, or if you're speak texting, or however that works. But I know that anytime, having participated in these shows, that you write a long comment, you are actually thinking through things and trying to get them up in a timely manner. And so I do really appreciate that. So I want to work through this comment really quickly, because I think it has a lot that needs to be parsed out here. All right, so folks, you can see what's on the screen here. This is a sad comment, but not all people flee neighborhoods because of racism. Well, if he's gone, he'll read the comment. When Black people move in, a lot move because of rising crime. Sadly, Black people account for a disproportionate amount of certain crimes. Black people are 13.4% of the U.S. population. The FBI arrest stats for 2019 show that Black people account for 5,025 out of 9,468 murders, 53%, and 40,000 40,024 robberies out of 73,764. Excuse me. That's 54%. Also, 33% of aggravated assaults and 33% of burglaries. These disparities have to be addressed if you are. Now, I don't know if the technology has failed me, but I can't scroll and get the rest of that comment. And so that's what I'm left with here. But if you can see the comment that's on the screen there, Jason, I'm working through very meticulously this comment, because I think that there were some stats that were used there that maybe I would look at and I would say, I'm not necessarily wanting to quibble with the stats here, but I'm wanting to quibble with the worldview that says Black people are inherently worse criminals or worse people than white people. And so I'll let you read what's on the screen there, and I'll just speak into the camera here and just comment on a lot of what's being said there. This has been, and I'm sure you know this, but for the audience that's tuning in, I'm sure you know that this has been part of the discussion of what we are looking at in policing and reimagining policing in America. The arrest rate. Well, let's back this up. Let's back this up, because we got to do this in the justice circle. We're not just starting with your garden variety 30-year-old who's committing petty crimes. Let's go all the way back to the classroom. Let's go all the way back to the school. Let's go all the way back to health and intervention, and really begin to unpack this in a way that helps us to understand that there's a disproportionate number of Black students who are punished in the schools, who are kicked out of schools, who are put out of educational situations that would help to advance them and move them forward. One of the reasons why I know this, I was one of those Black kids. It's funny that, Sonny was having a discussion about a kid that you guys have that's a problem kid.
Yeah.
And the more that he talked about him, I was actually that kid who was kicked out of school a disproportionate amount of times. I was, and I say disproportionate because there were white families who were watching what was happening, thankfully, who intervened in the situation and said, well, when Erskine gets kicked out of school with 6 weeks left in the school year, and the school says he cannot come here anymore, these families were willing to say, well, he can live at our house a week at a time until he finishes the school year so that he can get to a better situation in the summer. My mom was Black. She was trying to ask the same thing. Like, why do we have to kick him out of school? Why can he not come to school here? And a lot of the times I was doing the same thing that some of the other white students were doing, or involved in groups of situations with other white students. Some of these parents who I was friends with, the parents and friends with their kids, were saying, wait a minute, my son was with Erskine. My son did this. Erskine did the same thing. Erskine's kicked out of school. They're not kicked out of school. Now, I say all that just simply to say that if we were to go back and to look at the way that Black students are punished, Black students are denied educational opportunities, I think you can see a trend line here in the way that Black people are treated. That has been the discussion. Now, I'm not saying I want to weigh in heavily one side or another, but for Scott and other people out there who are throwing the statistics up, the discussion has been, we need to look at the fact that for similar crimes, and if you were to go to low income and sometimes majority culture communities, you would see a disproportionate rate of crime there. But it's not Black people that are committing crimes. It comes from the socioeconomic standpoint. And so there's a lot of factors that are involved that relate to the discussion of policing in America and how people are charged, what crimes they're charged from, marijuana possession, all the different things that are out there. And so that seemed like that was a case closed when you put the statistics up there. But I would say that's actually a case open for why we need to have a discussion about why are and how are people being prosecuted in these communities, and how are these crimes being responded to in these communities.
Yeah, I think with that, one of the things, because Scott, I think, is it Scott who put that? I can't read the name.
Yeah.
Okay, Scott.
But here's the rest of it.
Okay. Here's what, coming from my perspective, as a white guy, 40 something years old, I grew up, I had the opportunity to grow up as a military child, which put me into all kinds of context. There were times when I was majority. There were times I was minority. There were times I was the only white kid in the classroom. And then there are times when there were no Black people in the classroom. It was just all white students. So in many respects, that was a neat experience for me growing up, because it just gave me a lot of different perspectives on families, on communities, and different things like that. And I got the opportunity to see the good and the bad of all communities. I've gotten to see the racism in white communities, the blatant racism in white communities, North and South. Okay. And I've also gotten to see the hardships of the Black communities. And I've also gotten to see, I was also taken in, some of my best friends were Black and single moms, and they would take me in their house and I'd spend the night and eat their food and chill with them. And felt like I was as much part of the family as anybody. So I've gotten to experience it all. And one of the things I've learned with those numbers is a couple of things. First of all, nobody denies the hardships and the problems that communities have. White communities have them. Black communities have them. You want to talk about an issue that I've been trying to take up, is I'm passionate about fathers being in the house, and something like an 80% tile of an African-American baby born today, it's likely maybe a 17% chance the dad is going to be in the home. Well, you know what? That trend is not just in the Black community. That trend is also in the Hispanic community, which is a very strong family-oriented community. It's in the white community as well. And even they're finding it an increase in the Asian community. And the Asian community has had a history of keeping that tight-knit family together with a father in the home. So you're seeing trends happening throughout all of them. The other thing I realized about those numbers is that the disparities between the communities. When I went to, say, an all-white, I was in a small town, all-white community, the poverty levels and the issues that community dealt with were not comparable to what was happening to some of the Black communities I was in. And they were very different. And you cannot compare apples and oranges and say, well, obviously this comparison matches up, because it was really not like that. Yeah. And I don't think it's a fair advantage to try to make those comparisons. And second of all, I think you've got to understand that though there are differences in communities with personalities and the way things are done, it doesn't make them all bad. For example, in my family, if you were to sit down at the dinner table and have a talk, right? Talking to each other is usually just kind of, low toned, just kind of casually walking through things and talking about your day, or maybe laughing about a few things. But we avoided at all costs religion, politics, or anything controversial. All the stuff that
we're discussing now.
Anything controversial in our family, you just did not bring it up. You didn't talk about it. Now, I would go hang out with my Black friends in their house, and they had their family together. It was boisterous. It was loud. It was aggressive. My mom or my dad would have freaked out at the intensity at which these discussions got to. You would think that the house is about to explode and everyone's about to kill each other. That wasn't the case at all. Lively discussion. And I bring that nuance out to just show you there are differences in the culture that my culture would perceive. That's a violent conversation you're having right there. And that's not a violent conversation. That's just the way people are engaging each other, what's acceptable inside the house. I say all this to say I'm not taking away from the problems inside the community, but you have to recognize there are differences that are there. And I don't think those numbers justly look at the broader picture.
Oh man, hopefully I can hit that right button.
Yeah,
there's a nuance to the discussion that I wanted to add here, because he does rightly, and thank you so much for writing that much, Scott. I do truly appreciate the fact that you are clued into this show. But there's an aspect there of what now that I think we need to get to when we see those statistics and we see those numbers and we see the problems that communities face, and all communities face problems. There's just some that are better at masking their problems than others, and there are different numbers and different stats that say, our communities are in peril. I know some very affluent communities where suicide is a very big issue because keeping up with the Joneses and those kind of things are out
drugs.
There. Or drugs.
I've lived in or been around wealthy communities where methamphetamines and drugs are a massive issue, but they're not reported and they're not put out there for the statistics. Yeah. But if you go into suburbs of Chicago, if you go into some of these really even in Litchfield, if you go into even some of the wealthy, you find the substance abuse problems there. Yeah. So yeah,
obviously the humility to say, I don't know. Well, I do know what community you're in, but every community has its struggles and every community has its problems. But the nuance that I think is important to talk about there, Scott, is several years ago, I went to go visit a ministry in Omaha, Nebraska. And Ron Doltzler is the sort of the president of this ministry, and he writes a book called From the Seats to the Streets. And this is kind of where Jason is going in his comment. We'll put that up there in just a second. But it is, how do we remedy these situations? They had felt called to missions. He and his wife, they met in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, and they were waiting to go overseas on their assignment. There was a guy in inner city Omaha, Nebraska, who gave them a place to stay until they could get their assignment overseas. And they began to realize drugs, poverty, crime, killing. I mean, it was all in that neighborhood. And after a while, they began to realize, well, God was not sending them overseas. He was sending them to that neighborhood. Over time, they had other families that joined them together, and they started buying some of the homes there. They started renovating. They started living in those communities with those people. Dramatic reduction in crime, to the point where the police chief and the mayor said, "What are you guys doing in this community? Like, crime has gone down. Some of the things that you talked about, Scott, are going down." And they said, "We're just living in the community and living with the people." Now, if the issue was, once we start to see crime, or like neighborhood doesn't look safe, or those people look a little bit sketchy over there, we're out. We got to get out of this situation because it looks like there's going to be more crime, or my life is going to be in danger. I certainly get those human responses. But what about those Christians who, when they see a fire, they don't run from the fire, they run to the fire, and they begin to say, since we have the solution, and the solution is the gospel, then let's apply that in the way that we live in these communities. And I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm not saying that's what I can't look at anybody specifically, but I just know that unless Christians are willing to roll up their sleeves and say, you know what, we're going to engage in these communities that don't, there's some things that are not quite right in this community. We're not going to be able to see those kind of changes. And what will invariably happen is, okay, so let's move out of this community and like create a suburb over here where it's just our people. Well, okay, no, now there's some people that are moving in here. They look a little bit shady. Let's get farther and farther out. And then all of a sudden we wonder why we don't have any cultural influence. It's because we've huddled together and we're on the outskirts of society, because that's the safest place for us. And, you know, I'm not trying to tell anybody to be reckless. Kelly and I have actually had the discussion because of some of the things that are going on in Nashville with the rising price, housing prices, that if we sort of get pushed out from where we're at, the next logical place in my mind to go is more inner city into some of these difficult areas. And Kelly's like, I don't really know about that safety, and you travel. And so that's even an active discussion that we're having. And so I'm not putting that out there to say you're not moving into these communities. And if don't hear me say that. I did not say that. I'm just saying those are discussions that we're at least willing to have, to say, if these communities are bad, they're impoverished, they're in crime, there's a lot of things that are there. Maybe it's because they have no gospel witness, because when a gospel witness does come, it changes.
That's exactly the solution. We've talked about that from the very beginning of the show. Is one of the key solutions is being willing to go and live in the places where you are most needed and most comfortable. I'm sorry, uncomfortable even, where you might not be the majority, where it might not be safe. One of the issues I've gotten after all kinds of people who, for instance, like if it were, since I like to pick on LeBron a little bit, I think
pick on LeBron. Here we go. It's our on LeBron moment for today.
I have a lot of respect.
LeBron, you can come on the show, by the way.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for LeBron as an athlete, and I actually think he's quite brilliant, probably in business decisions and things like that. So I think, even though I think some of his community stuff and his Twitter account's kind of crazy, almost as crazy as President Trump's Twitter account. I would contend one of the best things LeBron James could do was to move back to his community and be a dad and be involved in his community and just begin to mentor these people around him with the platform he's got. I would,
are you listening, LeBron?
Yeah, I think that you can go and pour all kinds of money into a community and you can build buildings and sports centers and do all that. And those things are good things, but I think his most impact could be felt by watching, raising his son and his children, being a faithful husband to his wife, taking young men underneath him, teaching them how he makes business decisions, how he's an entrepreneur, how he takes the opportunities he has and makes more out of them. Those kind of things. I'm not even talking about from a Christian perspective. I'm just simply looking at it from a secular perspective. If these influential men and women move back to their communities and began to tackle it from the inside out, from organically, I think they make a tremendous impact. Now, you just take that wisdom that's intertwined in the world, and you actually add the power of the gospel to it. I think that's what the solution is we have to be willing to kind of maybe kick some of our affluence to make an influence.
Yeah. And I will say, for those of you who are reading through some of the comments that Scott made today, if you've just joined the show, Scott was on the show a couple of weeks ago. So he's definitely a friend of the show. And if anybody is here today and you're maybe misunderstanding the context that Scott is coming from, I've spent years with Scott and his family, actually lived with Scott for a period of time, full disclosure here. And we have walked up and down the streets of the city, knocking on doors, telling people about Christ, driving the church van, picking kids up, being in difficult places. And so sometimes, Scott, I don't even know why you make some of these comments. It's almost like you're playing devil's advocate, because I look at the comment and I'm like, people could mistake that the wrong way if they didn't know you, but I actually know you and I know what you do in the community. I know, the political stances that you've taken in the community and the ways that you try to uphold righteousness and justice in the community. And so I just want to make sure that people understood that there's a larger context. Yeah. And the reason why I'm dealing with Scott's comment with a little bit more thorough treatment there is because there is a context behind what it is that he's saying, not that he can absolve himself or get away from any type of responsibility. He's, like most of the people who watch the show, trying to figure out, how do I more faithfully live in the situation that we find ourselves in? And so thank you for that comment. And thank you. We got some wonderful comments from Jason. I had forgotten that, like, Mason is on here as well. Mason, I did a camp for you guys last year. Great to see you as well. I'd forgotten that there's some younger students who watch this show. I think our language is good today.
Yeah.
You have to use the censorship. Yeah.
No beeps.
No. Sometimes the Erskine Music Show, I have to censor myself because I get a little bit passionate on that. But with you here, Pastor, calm me down. We got the sanctuary.
The sanctuary.
The sanctuary. It's a holy place right here.
There
There'll be no craziness on this show. And so I just felt so much more peaceful on this show. And it's a lot better when the two of us can actually be in the same place together. I can kind of read your body language and different things. It's kind of hard to do when you're screen to screen. But we do the best that we can. Have really enjoyed this episode because you guys make the show. Like, we can talk all day long, but it's not the same thing as when you guys get on here, begin making some comments, and then really dissecting some of these issues. Because I believe, like I said before, this will kind of be my final word, that I believe that there's a lot of people out there who are trying to figure out, like Jason had said, okay, so statistics, if there's crime, if there's not crime, police, not police, all the different things that are out there. How do we more faithfully live, certainly as believers? How do we share the gospel? Where do we share the gospel? What's the context that we share the gospel? And there's no one size fits all. And so for some, they may listen to this broadcast and think, man, this affluence has become a problem. Let me move to a community and then have more resources so that I can invest those in the community and in people's lives. And that totally makes sense for you. And that's like the next action step. For other people, it's a more contemplative approach in which you've got to figure out over a long period of time how to bless people and how to be kingdom and gospel and incarnation where you're at. And so all different responses, all different types of people and ages obviously look at this show and listen to this show. And so we're thankful for everybody that gets a chance to join us. Jason, I'll let you get the final word, and then we got to go on to the next things because we got exciting things planned today.
I've said this before in the show, and I truly believe it, that the church provides the space, the best space for these issues to be resolved, for reconciliation, for restoration, for redemption, because the church upholds, when the church is being the church, we uphold the cross of Christ where mercy and justice perfectly meet. And where the blood of Christ can atone for sin and the life of Christ can bring life to communities and relationships. And when the church is being the church, living in the power of the Holy Spirit, governed by the inerrant and fully sufficient Word of God, when Christians are living out that Philippians 2 Sermon on the Mount kind of life, big things happen. And they're not, in my experience, they're not magnificent mountaintop experiences all the time. Actually, God is found a lot of times in the grind. He's found in the weaknesses. He's found those small times on the couch where you're having dinner together, you're talking through things, or you're engaging a community that is not like your own, or you're making decisions to really be the light of Christ to people you have nothing in common with. but maybe the gospel, or hopefully the gospel. And so one of the things I love about what we are doing is we're trying to be that space for this to happen. And it just so happens that God has ordained that a black man and a white man come together and enjoy a fruitful friendship in life, to allow that platform to happen, even though the one's in Nashville and one's in Litchfield. We're coming at it from two different contexts, one rural, one urban. We're coming at it from two different contexts of ethnicity, one black, one white. We're coming at it from even economically different. However, we have Christ in common, and that unity in Christ is what keeps this whole thing going. And I believe that unity in Christ is what's going to keep this going, and what's going to keep the church going. And so I would just commend that the way forward for the church is just to be the unifying, restorative, redemptive-minded, reconciliation-minded church, and that we can keep this conversation going, this dialogue going, the comments going, so that we can keep talking and hopefully put some more action to our feet.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Project Connect in Nashville. Yeah. And we didn't talk a lot about them, but they are continuing to do some fantastic work in Nashville. And I believe they're going to broaden that work out. And so you'll hear more about that on season 3. I wanted to thank all the folks, the guests that have come on the show in this season, and all the folks who have just so wonderfully supported us. We will be upgrading some technology next year and next season. And so look for us around, I would say, after Labor Day. Yeah, for season 3, we'll get started back on that. And so you guys have a fantastic summer. Go out and serve. Go out and be a change. Jason was talking about there, salt and light. There's some folks who are just joining us now for the discussion, but you can always go back, since this is put on YouTube for perpetuity. You can go back and see any portion of the discussion that you've missed. It's also streaming live on Facebook Live. And so thank you for the international audience that's tuning in. And I know these discussions are a lot of kind of what's going on in America, but it does give you a window into, the context. So as I said before, I'm a music artist based now in Nashville. I've been there for the last 8 years. And so it gives nuance and context for at least some of the songs that I write, like Black and White, Life Matters. In some of the places that I travel, like we had some students that got on here and talked about me being at some of their camps. Gives sort of a nuance to why I'm so passionate about going and doing those kind of things. It'd be far easier to go and do something else. It'd be far easier to just kind of stay locally and just, invest myself. And we're trying to do that with our house church plant more. But I think it's also important to travel around and to be able to have these discussions and to be in different communities where you have a different context and a different feel about some of these things. So thank you so much. Wonderful season of Way Forward. Thank you guys for all your comments. God bless. And we will see you in September, Lord willing. You may come back before then, so don't wait until then to get ready. Get ready now.